The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dan started coming to you and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally got.
Aloha, everyone. I'm geologist Philip Ong with Mr. Dane DuPont from a nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. Kīlauea has erupted another episode number 11, that began on Tuesday and ended on Wednesday. And we'll recap that for you guys here today. How are you doing today, Dane? How's your week been?
Doing good, getting used to the now weekly eruptions up at the summit and kind of expecting them to come into the show with. So it's been pretty interesting. We've had a lot of photos on Hawaii Tracker, which we're going to share some with you today at the end. So stick around for that. Otherwise, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat and we'll see what we can do with the Q&As.
I appreciate that, Dane. We are missing our ASL interpreters this week. We got Lou up with us today, producing. Thanks for joining us, Lou. And unless anyone else has got anything else to say here to start, let's jump into it, eh? All right, so let me get to the right window here. And let's see if this button will work here. And get ready for our Hawaiian Volcano Summary this week. Hello, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for February 27th, 2025. After a 5-day pause, Kīlauea resumed erupting from its summit on Tuesday night and stopped on Wednesday morning after just under 13 hours of eruption. What was really special about this episode was very high lava fountains compared to previous ones. This time we've reached a peak of 600 feet or 180 meters high, which is above that western rim of the main caldera. So I made some spectacular views and images. Lots of Pele's hair and pumice was thrown up onto the crater rim, while also flooding the crater floor up to 80% full of the new lava, as you see here. This is a KW camera from the west rim of the crater, looking down at the day of eruption and the most recent night as well, where we've had some crustal overturning of the ponded lava, where it's the thickest and most fluid there, as well as some ooze-up flows occurring in the northeast part of the crater floor, originally unconnected from the main fountaining flows. Looked at it in a thermal view. Here's an F1 camera showing that outburst and that march across the crater floor, as well as these ooze-ups on this northeast side as lava flows from underneath the crust to emerge in that area over there. And one last time lapse to share in our summary this week. This is a B2 camera that I've stabilized a little bit for the flow that came across and then continued to move and settle a little bit within the last day as well. So you see that main pulse there with no major movement of the crater floor as a whole in between. All of this is happening still within the main caldera, within Halemaʻumaʻu crater and the vents at the southwest part of the crater. This map is a few weeks old, but the locations are still the same, and the extent of lava is also the same here. It's just gotten a bit thicker. If we look at the ground tilt over the last month at Kīlauea Summit, the summit's in blue here, so we see the repressurization following episodes, and then as an episode begins, the deflation and the repressurization. So here we are, this is episode 11 that we just experienced. The buildup after 10 started off fairly quickly and then slowed down a bit before, after 5 days of pause, erupting for 13 hours and now resuming once again. As we've seen from the US just before, they're able to offer brackets of expected times for eruptions based on the rate of reinflation here. And so today's forecast is that a new episode is likely within the next 5 to 10 days. And as we mentioned at the top, it's been a pattern of 4 weeks in a row now, or 4 weeks in a row now, where we've had between 5 and 7 day pauses following less than 23 hours eruptions. So that's the eruption information. The main hazard to people is still the VOG. Here is the SO2 from the VOG Measurement Prediction Project forecast. And you can see that the winds have been changing as we speak here, and over the next couple of days are forecast to blow more around to the Hilo side and to catch the northern part of the island as well. So actually we're looking at the sulfate aerosols, the particles of VOG, and the more pure gas is visible there blowing to the northeast as well. So even though most of that gas blew off to the southwest with the original blast and trade winds and has got caught in the onshore, offshore, and Kona, as you can see from this purple air data from the island here, it's possible that over the next couple of days, the winds will remobilize this material and bring it back across to affect more of the island than you're seeing here presently. So even though it was a short 13-hour blast of gas, it's still producing significant effects and impacts across the island. Here's a capture from satellite of the SO2 plume over the island following that episode. That's a story on Kīlauea. Mauna Loa remains quiet still. Very few earthquakes at the summit. There was one slightly larger one in the northwest quadrant here. That's part of the expected recharge and reinflation pattern of the volcano as it continues to spread and get taller over time while still very low in earthquakes, as you can see here following the 2022 buildup and eruption. Here is the vertical at Mauna Loa summit showing that steady increasing rise over the last year. So everything as normal in Mauna Loa, and Kīlauea continues to be interesting, and we'll await the next episode in the next 5 to 10 days. And that's our summary for this week. So with that said, we'll go to our hazard summary, which we've covered a little bit here, but just to make sure we're crediting properly. This is from the School of Earth Science and Technology at UH Manoa, the VMAP project here. And the forecast dashboard here is all of the islands. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that that SO2 layer is affecting mostly the island. You see it moving into the upper Hilo areas and then into the saddle here. But if I click onto the SO4, which is what happens to the SO2 as it reacts with a water vapor and with the assistance of sunlight there, it creates these particles of sulfates. And that's what you're seeing here that are collecting and swamping this whole west side of the island. And if you look further afield, it looks like there might be some impacts on Maui upcoming as well from this too. So interesting to see how that can have widespread impacts here. If we look at our statewide interactive maps, right now we are seeing some moderate air quality measurements here from Maui, as well as the ones from West Hawaii, but you see that this map doesn't have nearly the coverage of the purple air that we like to use. So here's some more data from all across the west side, south, all the way to the north, and even here in the saddle with quite a bit of PM 2.5 elevated readings. Here is our SO2 layer from windy.com. You can see that big concentration of SO2 here that initially blew off here to our southwest, but you can see it's getting entrained with these winds now circling back around and pulling it back across islands. So that's the situation we're dealing with here. And as we showed you before, there's our Mounts project SO2 satellite. So the most recent day, it's down lower, but for yesterday, you can see here that big patch of SO2 that's visible actually all the way past Molokai even here as well. Zooming into the national park, where you might be going to see the changing landscape or to look at an eruption if it might upcome within the next week. You can see that mostly we're in a green. There is a steam vent showing orange on the map. We don't often see that, but there it is at the moment. Whereas Kau is all in the green at present. So we have slack winds there, 4 miles an hour, 2 meters per second, which is why we see this kind of pooling circle area of expected impact of the gases at the summit here. So let's come to the charts. And we can see this is going back the last 24 hours or so, SO2 on the left, the PM 2.5 on the right, and everything is largely in the green where it's registering here. Except here are the steam vent measurements where you can see the SO2 has been coming up just in the last few hours here since 2:30 p.m. and when the winds are shifting and blowing that material over in that direction. And everything else in the green there, as you can see. So wind shift is just starting here. So that's our hazard summary for this week. We'll move on to the earthquakes, where we can start off showing this map, which is colored by depth. So here's our legend. And so one thing that we don't often go into detail here is our total depth here is everything more than 25 miles. That's this deepest purple. And then the blue goes from 12.5 to 25 miles. So really the blue and the purple are the whole bottom half of the spectrum. And then we start dividing it more finely towards the top here. Here the green being at 3 kilometers, and then yellow another 3, and orange and red all being that same kind of slice through the earth there. So I'm pointing that out because this week we have more colors than we usually see on this map. We have our typical purples and dark blues here in the Pahala region. we associate with a hotspot feeder towards the volcanoes. We have our activity on Kīlauea, south flank, and summit, which we'll zoom into here in a minute, and a few more offshore, downrift events here in lower Puna, highlighted by this magnitude 2.1 that occurred a couple weeks ago now. So all these other events are settling events around the island, even the ones shallower here on Mauna Loa, deeper ones under Mauna Kea, over on the northwest side of Hualalai, 2.5 and 2.6, and offshore 3.3. And here's some of these greens, that deeper depth over 3.3 Mahukona area, 2.4 over offshore Hilo, and over above Pahala earthquakes there is our 2.5 as well. So a little bit more diversity than we usually see. So let me zoom it in here to Kīlauea, where we see most of our action. So a few earthquakes here to summit over the last 2 weeks. Some down here, just beyond the bend on the south flank. But the highlight really has been this cluster right in here. Let's get it in even a little closer here. So let me put it back to the last 2 days and clean it up a little bit here. So most recently was this one at 3.2 at 4 miles depth there. That was 3 o'clock this morning, with a couple of aftershocks, 2.2 there, and another 1.8 over there as well. So there is still overall background seismicity of the south flank, with a few bigger earthquakes like that one showing that it's still moving, perhaps independently of what's happening here at the summit. And so that's the earthquake pattern by depth. And as we like to look at it as well on this plot by size, you can see that the largest one was at 3.3 offshore Kona. The next largest was at 3.2 we just talked about on the south flank. And everything else the past week has been under magnitude 3 here across the island. So this looks like a lot of dots here, but this is actually fairly quiet and not a lot for us to talk about. That's outside of the expected patterns on Hawaii. So that'll conclude our recent earthquakes. And we'll move on to our monitoring segment here. And to start off with, we'll look at signals for the last week. So starting with crater elevation. These automatic plots still have, as everything is raw, still have some of this noise. So here we happen to have some noise from last week still skewing our plot scale over here on the left. So what we're really looking at is all in this little window, but we have all this extra space here that we have to just deal with. And we can't see exactly quite enough detail how much we actually gained in elevation and how much we dropped back down here. But what you can clearly see is that we ended up maybe slightly higher than when we started, but not very different. We're not really near 960 meters yet, right? We're still well below that, even after this initial peak might have gotten close to that depth of the crater there. So we can just see that each of these pulses is leaving perhaps a few meters or tens of feet of flow accumulating on top of there, depending on how much they actually degas and then settle down, right? We'll talk about some of the pictures they release of the chunks of lava thrown out from the fountains are super frothy. So there's a lot of gas in there, and it can really settle down and deflate. Not in a manner of I mean, it can kind of basically release the gas, and that top surface can kind of sag back down in that same place, right? Without it being changing from within underground, which is what we normally call deflation. So that can be confusing to use that word in all these multiple ways. I'll try to explain it a little more clearly there. So there's our crater elevation gain a little bit there. Earthquakes are not really distinguishable in any kind of pattern here over the last week. Prior to this episode, maybe a little bit of a increase and a little bit less afterwards, but not very convincing there. Our tilt meter, blue is for the summit, green is for the rift zone. The rift zone, you can see, has been deflating steadily with nothing really to note there. Our summit signal, zoomed into this last week here, you can still see this daily little wiggle that we're getting right around midday each of these days there. But overall, the pattern is, if you can try to average that out, something like up and then over and then up some more and then down, right? That's more or less the smoothed out version there. And it was a longer buildup than we perhaps expected last week when we look at the pattern of existing eruptions that were under that 15-hour threshold. But we're really stuck more to the pattern of every week, as we mentioned up top. So we'll come back to that here in a few minutes as well. But earthquakes, time versus depth here. Time on the bottom and depth here on the side. So here's our cluster of South Flank earthquakes that just came in this morning, and some of the aftershocks following it. Lots of smaller ones and a couple bigger ones there, all within an otherwise unimpressive pattern of events here. There's this interesting little vertical signal right there within the last week. But if we come to the map here, we'll see those are, let's see where those deep purple ones are. They're all down in here in this Pahala region and all through here. So there's our background South Flank events with that highlight earthquake, and very few events in the rift zone, Southwest Rift, even that rift connector, even around the summit itself has been pretty quiet. You can see here some of the events from previous in the week. So there's our cross section. We'll keep going. Looking at the last month of time now, so we're zooming out a bit. Our scale is less useful here than before, so we'll just keep going past that. Earthquake counts are showing a little bit of this sawtooth pattern that maybe corresponds a little bit to the episodes there, right? But since our earthquake counts on this graph are catching everything on the map here, including all the South Flank and all the Pahala, then it's not quite as clean as you might see otherwise. Right? We're looking at just summit earthquakes. So there's the last month. So episode 11 here, 10, 9, 8, and this would have been 7, just off the graph here a little more than a month ago. So this is Uekahuna and Pu'o'o, and at Sand Hill, we see that same pattern on both components there. So the whole system pressurizing, visible on both sensors, different parts of the volcano. There is the last month of depth versus time. If anything, maybe a little bit more steady down in the Pahala zone, but pretty constant up top as well here in Kīlauea. And here's a bigger pattern, earthquakes per week over the last year. So we can see the build up to our eruptions. We had intrusions and eruptions on the rift zones last year. That's all through here, leading up to the September East Rift eruption there, and then eventually the December eruption out of Halemaʻumaʻu as well. Maybe a little bit more over here. Yeah, right in there. So corresponding to this GPS excursion right down there. So that beginning of this current eruption here really marks an interesting change. When we saw prior to that, we're on this expanding trend. This is a measurement of the distance north and south across the caldera at Kīlauea summit. So both sides are getting further and further apart over the years, even as they're interrupted by these little reliefs of various little eruptions or intrusions that send pressure elsewhere. But you can see that since this change, here's the first 3 episodes are kind of muddled together in there because they were short and not much pause in between there, these 3. Since then, we've essentially been fairly in equilibrium here with this variation up and down across what seems to be a fairly flat line. So that's really interesting, and to see how long that will actually last. There's no indication here that anything needs to change anytime soon from the data here. Right? So the thing that could change would be something like a big earthquake or some other adjustment like that comes unexpectedly and sends the system out of equilibrium as it seems to be right now. So down at Pu'o'o, the line of distance north to south across that Middle East rift was going down, shrinking before as it contracts and comes closer together. That East Rift intrusion eruption caused this excursion there, essentially. But you can see that since the beginning of that eruption in December, we've also been more steadily coming down, contracting once again. And so we're resuming the previous patterns there, such that earthquake counts are overall fairly low compared to what we've seen across most of the last 5 years. Right? If you look here, we're 1,000 earthquakes per month. We're just below that here for February, looks like, and there are only a handful of months that we've had that over the last 5 years. So really on the lower end of earthquakes. And there's a GPS for the last 5 years showing that pattern of our stability now compared to really that long-term expansion and injection of magma into the crater and eruptions. And Pu'u'o with that long-term decline following the 2020 eruption at the summit, and now once again following a 2024-25 eruption to the summit. So those are our signals. The monitoring notices are interesting as well. So we'll pick it up on Tuesday when eruption actually begins here. They just put out an alert within 30 minutes of the episode beginning that we have that onset of eruption here. All right, they noted that within the first 30 minutes, fountains had already reached 200 feet or 60 meters high. So when episode ends, a little more than 12 hours, 44 minutes later, they noted that peak heights reached 600 feet, 180 meters, 1 to 2 hours later. They noted that the flows covered approximately 75 to 80% of the Halemaʻumaʻu crater floor and sent lava flows onto the downdrop block around the September 2023 vents. Both of the north and south vents continued to degas, but they were differently active. If you recall, episode 10, only the north vent activated. But episode 11 here, we had a north vent began at 6:22, and a little more than half an hour later, the south vent began. And when it went to shut off, the north vent stopped first at 6:35 a.m., followed by the south vent half an hour later at 7:06 a.m., which is really interesting there. So, and that's more interesting if I'm just going to jump ahead here to the update that was released today, right? And they note here, last night, strong intermittent glow was present at the south vent, but the north vent remained uncharacteristically dark. And so something interesting between events happening there, and just a little curiosity of what the nozzle is changing and looking like for when the next episode starts back up to perhaps understand what might change. So this is interesting as well here. The onset of episode 11 was preceded by the appearance of glow along the row of September 2023 vents on the east side of Halemaʻumaʻu crater. The glow began at one cone on the evening of February 24th. This is the night before, and became visible along the entire 2023 fissure around 6 p.m. on February 25th. So that entire length, that's about half an hour before the onset there. Glow on the fissure remained persistent through much of the night. This suggests magma within the vent system may have intruded into the molten interior of Halemaʻumaʻu crater prior to the onset of episode 11. Similar glow was not observed along the 2023 vents prior to or during episode 10. So that's really interesting to note there, and we'll look at that here. So I pulled up let's look at the B1 camera, here. So I've pulled it back to, where did I pull it back to the start here? The 23rd, the evening of the 23rd. So you see it's dark. There is actually a little bit of flow popping up here. There's a glow from the vents over there, a little bit more glow from flow over there. And here's our night of the eruption finally. And now we have extra glow and flows coming up through there. And persistent flows. Eruption has been over now for a day. Let me loop this back around. Let me zoom it in for you guys so you can see a little better there. There's those cones from September 2023. A little bit of lava glow looks like from some lava oozing up there. You see it oozes up separately from the other eruption. Even now, continuing today at present, which if I come to the most recent thermal view here, let's try to load this. Yeah, so this reload. And right now at 1716, we still have this hot spot over here in this northeast part of the crater, still showing activity ongoing right now. And so one other note is if lava actually is injecting below there, and we've noted before on the B2 camera that sometimes we see the crater floor actually rise. So that's worth looking at here as well. Let's play the B2 camera from just before the eruption of episode 10, which happens there. We noted that episode had no change, no movement of the crater floor. You see this very little movement here in the foreground, just the shadows of the sun. And here we come. Still nothing, no, very little change. We're to the 24th now. This is when the first glow is reported. It's probably going to be off camera to the right over there, and we're just looking at daytime over here. So finally, we have a flow come through here, and then it starts deflating, perhaps because lava is continuing to flow under the crust out to the flow front, or perhaps because it's moving into some other area away from the flow front there. So that's the daytime views. Interesting. It does not look like it's really rippling across the whole crater floor like we've seen in previous episodes from this camera from the B2. So whatever's happening with these ooze ups is a little bit different there, and that's going on, which is why we're digging into it a little bit more here. So they also note here, this is the first update after the pause. Large amounts of pumice, Pele's hair, and lightweight reticulite were deposited on west rim of Halemaʻumaʻu crater during last night's blanketing, with a few lightweight ribbon bombs of up to 1 to 2 feet, 0.3 to 0.6 meters, found on top of the pumice as well. So all the signals, as far as changing from deflation to inflation, the tremor dropping but not turning off entirely, all of that is the same as all the previous pauses. And so that's the basis of presuming that the eruption is just going to resume at some point once it recharges once again. And following that same analysis with a pattern of bracketing, that's where they note that it could be 5 to 10 days here. So that comes more from the update from today, which you can see there. Where is it here? 5 to 10 days. Likely between Tuesday, March 4th and Sunday, March 9th, depending on the inflation rates at the summit, right? And that's worth pointing out that when we looked at the inflation rate at the beginning of last week here, right there, we're looking at that very initial bounce back. It starts off going pretty fast, and then it stabilizes and goes at a gentler increase right there. So we're seeing that same pattern occur here over the last couple of days, same kind of thing. So that's where it really can vary. We noted on a previous episode that it was going up from that first gear to that second gear, and then it actually got to some point where it seemed to stabilize before it finally came back up. So when you have this kind of thing happening as well, then that can delay it as well. So that's why it's such a big window of 5 days there. And yeah, I believe those are the highlights of the USGS updates from this week here. And we'll just wait to see what happens next. The gases really being the biggest impact. This was interesting as well. Not the last thing to note here, they measured at 11 a.m. on February 20th, just after episode 10 ended, during the beginning of that pause, a rate of 2,100 tons per day is our most recent SO2 measurement there. So in this ballpark of about 1,000 during the pauses and 10,000 during the actual fountaining events. Okay, so then here is that most recently updated timeline. It was 13 hours following 5 days. The previous one was 13 hours following 7 days. And the previous two, 22 and a half, 21 and a half hours, 16 hours there, right? So you can see that we're in a pattern now where the last 4 have had pauses of about a week there, 6 plus or minus 1 days there. So that would fall right in line with the expectation. USGS says 5 to 10. That fits right in that pattern right there. All right, so that's our monitoring data, and we'll take a break here to say some thank yous. Dan
All
and Lou?
right. Yeah, I will bring in Lou real quick. Thank you, Phil. And we'll be back and maybe do some questions, answers after this part, huh? All right. So let's get Lou out here. And a little bit different today. Lou up top. How are you doing, Lou? You are muted.
There we go. Well, all kinds of new stuff going on with us today, huh? All right. I'm doing good. How you doing?
All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into our mid-roll, huh?
We're gonna community corner it first.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Let's throw that up there. All right. Here we are for community corner, February 27th, huh? All right, so obviously we know there's a lot of stuff going on in the park, but as a reminder for their alerts and conditions, the Kīlauea Visitor Center is closed. That's been 10 days ago. Construction all over the park. Pu'upuai parking lot and overlook for nene protection. We'd seen in the past that the parking lots and overlooks have been closed for nene nesting. This is a little something different. You'll see around the park that there are a lot of places that have cones so that people don't pull off to the side and then walk out to go see the viewing. So pay attention when you're driving around for that to keep these nene safe. Yellow jackets, and a reminder that never enter a closed or restricted area. Established eruption viewing overlooks are in place for your safety. Phil didn't touch on this. I don't know if he's going to later, but this is another alert that popped up on NPS's site. It is the small steaming vent about 3 inches wide has opened up in the ground near the overlook.
Whoa.
What happened?
Hold on. For some reason, it's blank on the other end.
Oh, yeah?
This isn't showing.
You're not showing it. Oh, yeah?
Interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, look at that. Well, that's
new
odd.
things.
Let me drop it and put it back in real quick.
Yeah.
How's that? Are we missing something here?
Now it's working. Now it's good.
We're back up?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know what that was about, but I think it's fixed now. Thank you.
All right.
Chat for.
All right. Welcome to the community corner for February 27th. I'll just keep going since the other words were, let's see here. We'll go back. It was just talking about the nene there. And this is a steaming vent about 3 inches wide, is opened up in the ground near the overlook Wahine Kapu steaming bluff and is emitting hot steam. They have this area roped off, so just pay attention to that if you're hiking around that area. As always,
our volunteer Yvonne was the one that found that, and that's her photo there.
That's right. So great cool find by her. Right.
Saw it when it was first the size of a quarter, and now it was 3 inches, or roughly at that point, 3 inches.
Here is our safety tips for driving. The park is filled with many different people from different parts of the world. So drive defensively, prepare for sudden stops, sharp turns, and slower vehicles. Maintain safe distances. Just a friendly reminder of everything for safe trips driving around the park. And there's your viewing areas. Volcano House is obviously the easiest. It's straight out from which is now closed visitor center, but you can hike around and find the viewing all over the place. Construction everywhere. And I'm going to touch on one other thing on construction in 1 second here. And here's a reminder that the KVC restrooms, sidewalks, water station, and about half of its parking will be unavailable during the construction project. And you can see another photo from Yvonne, hooked us up with that. They have blocked off half of the parking in the visitor center area. So if you're going in there and you want to go out to the Volcano House and view, and you have parked here before, know that parking is limited, and there is a bypass that has been set up outside of the Volcano House. So I recommend pulling into this parking area first, slowly, hoping somebody will pull out, and then try Volcano House. They have definitely cut their parking up there, so it's going to be tough. Go slow. And another thing is there is no water filling station there. So when you come to the park, make sure you brought water with you. Dane, you might know, does KMC have a water filling station up there in the new Welcome Center? I've not seen one, so we need to reach out for that.
You could fill your bottles in the bathroom. I know that much. I can't. I'm trying to think of water. Yeah, I'm trying to think of where the public water fountain would be there. I'm not super familiar with KMC.
Well, we'll check into that one. Since the visitor center is closed, the park and film programs like After Dark in the Park and Leo Manu are suspended until KVCO reopens. The project could take up to 2 years, but I recommend checking in with us. We will post it, but we've already had one kind of surprise presentation. That was the Iceland presentation that happened 2 weeks ago. So you never know if they throw something in there. This is our new Welcome Center. So it's no longer our Kīlauea Visitor Center. It is our new Welcome Center, and it is at the Kīlauea Military Camp. So if you just keep driving up past, which is now closed, area. You just keep driving past the visitor center and you will run right into it on your right-hand side. Check it out. And the program that they have running at the park is Life on the Edge. Learn about Hawaii geology, culture, plants, and animals. They have 4 different times. Ranger programs can be canceled due to staffing issues, hazardous weather, or volcanic conditions. So check the Kīlauea Welcome Center. It's going to be tough for me to remember that one. Kīlauea Welcome Center for more information.
Oh, and apparently there is no bathroom water available. Those bathrooms I was talking about are apparently now been made employees only.
Oh,
yeah. So a little bit of change there.
Yeah.
So take your own water.
Yeah. We're coming up on March 1st, which is the first Saturday of the month. And that means that Kama'aina get free entrance into the Pacific Tsunami Museum. So go support them down there. They'll appreciate it. And I like to drop the Imiloa event that's happening Into the Deep. It's a traveling exhibit. If you've got kids or you just dig dinosaurs, check that out. It's going from now until May 4th. Visitors will embark on a thrilling journey into Earth's ancient past, encountering marine reptiles, dinosaurs, and dynamic ecosystems that shaped our planet. So check that out. I have a link in the description if you're interested, and double check to make sure that they're open and all the other information for tickets. And our newsletter is about to come out for the month, so recommend subscribing. You get first dibs at it before we post it all over. So you check that out. You can subscribe. It's all subscribe. You can also check. I already have it in the chat. And if you're looking for another way to find us, if you have another social platform, we are all over the place. Facebook, YouTube, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're still striving for that LinkedIn number so that we can live stream over there.
Still trying to build the YouTube number too.
Yes, that would be good.
Been a constant battle.
Right.
So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in today. All the likes, subscriptions, shares, all that stuff really does help. We did have one super chat come through. That was a $3 NZ super chat with a sticker from Amelia there. I appreciate that support. If you would like to support us, we do take donations over at hveri.org/
You see, that's not working. There we go.
Some little bugs today.
Yeah.
hveri.org/donate. Sorry, one. There we go. Yeah, we'd also like to thank County of Hawaii and the Kīlauea recovery team and the Puma Strong grants that have come through the Hawaii Community Foundation to support this program and our other programs as well as everybody that's here today. So thank you guys. And I believe
right on.
That gets us through. And we will bring back up Phil. And thank you, Lou, for jumping in.
You got it.
All right, later.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Yeah, I was actually up at the visitor center myself. Had to deal with all of that parking issues, all the cones, all that. So yeah, for sure, be careful. And people
please don't
where
park.
They're not supposed to.
Yeah.
You have to kind of squeeze through areas that are like way narrower than are supposed to be. So it's getting tricky out there. We're desperate. Yeah.
Yeah. Falling off and parking on the
really
side of the road isn't ideal out there.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you might check the KMC bowling alley and arcade area if you're looking for water. That would be what I would recommend.
They also sell it at the general store and at Volcano House.
Right. I think there's some drinking fountains in that building as well. But you can always ask at the Kīlauea Welcome Center now, right? And see where they direct you as well.
All right. Well, we have some questions. Do you want to do those now, or?
We probably should show all these time lapses first so we can talk about what actually happened.
All right.
And then get through some of that.
Sounds good.
So let's turn to our observations here. And starting off, here's actually a live view of the YouTube channel from USGS and showing the winds changing and blowing these fumes degassing from the vents right at this camera. So you really can't see a whole lot here. But some of the Summit webcam views from a little earlier today, there is a S2 camera showing that ongoing degassing from both vents there, north vent and south vent. There's a KW camera getting vogged out as well. The thermal can see through that, and you can see that most of the action in the middle has cooled off.
Reset that screen so it pops up. There we go. We didn't have a picture for a moment. We're good.
Yeah, I didn't touch anything actually. All right, so yeah, there's that F1 camera. Couldn't see much through all the VOG anyways. I can scroll back up. There's a KW with the VOG in the way. The S2 with the degassing vents there. And through the thermal, we can still see that northeast crater floor breakout ongoing there still. The V1, a little bit more zoomed out, but you can still see a lot of VOG blowing toward the camera there. And here from across a crater, there's a gas blowing left to right across this view where usually it goes off that way. So also maybe if this was moving, could see some of the new flows are occurring over in this area over here as well. And there's a B2, if we looked at one of those time lapses earlier with that new landscape and the camera here in the foreground. K2, up in the edge of the crater, still showing that VOG degassing to southwest there. And up top from the flank of Mauna Loa, see it's not a huge amount of gas coming out here, but it is pretty low to the ground here, blowing across the landscape as you can see. Right, so that's the current views. So what did this look like in the webcam? So let's start off with the V1 camera here. The initial fountaining pretty high and then reducing down in volume, spreading across the crater floor. And then the next day, still moving even as the fountains are shut off and the vents are degassing here. Glowing last night, some crustal overturning events happening, especially over here on the left. Well, still a little bit of glow from the south vent in particular, out of the back over there as well. So that was the V1. I can maybe see how slow I can get it here and play the beginning at least, where you can see that first lava oozing out of the channel. Then the fountains come up. They start hitting this upper ledge and cascading this extra flow down. That's where those highest fountains landed, where they hadn't been landing so much before. And then it ends up looking similar to the previous episodes where we have both vents active with this double stream coming out into the crater floor there. So yeah, that's the V1. The S2, let's see, let's not do that one. Let's do this one, because the S2 camera was moved partway through the sequence. So we do it like this, we can see that initial outburst and then that oozing happening later on there. Play one more time. Double vent action, and then that draining, cooling, degassing process out of all this piled lava on the crater floor here. Moving on to the KW camera. There in the high fountains. I was saying high fountains, that's relative to this eruption, right? Because when compared these to Kīlauea Iki, that was 1,900 feet high. These don't seem quite so high. It's about 1/3 that height. Pu'o'o had 1,500, 400 feet. Mauna'u had 1,800 feet. So anything less than 1,000 maybe isn't quite the highest level of high fountains here in Kīlauea, but relatively speaking for this eruption, it is the highest we've seen, and 600 is pretty dang high. So those were that's that first burst right there. There it is. And you see the flood coming across. There's an initial burst of lava out this northwest edge of the crater floor. Then it directs more to the east and southeast, taking that usual path from that upper perched pond area to the next perched pond area, and then out across the crater floor from there. And with the ooze-ups coming up there in the distance in the background over there. So let me zoom into that area right now so you can take a look at how those are disconnected, in fact. It's harder to see in the dark, but here in the daytime, you'll see the edge of the flow, and then there separately, here come these ooze-up flows. That persists through the day and through the next night and into the next day, which is today. Still ongoing there. Easier to see that in the thermal camera. Let's pull that up next here. So there's our initial outburst, high fountains, and the oozing flow there in the background. Overturning crust of a lava lake here in the foreground, and that latest pulse of it in the central part of the crater right through there. So a couple interesting things here. See these two flows, they ooze up farthest northeast and a little bit more central east, but eventually these two actually meet right in there by today and actually touch and connect there. And likewise, if I come to this edge, you see this long flow that comes from the actual vents over here. It continues moving as well, and it eventually will go and meet this as well. So ultimately, the lava ends up all connected by the end of the sequence here from the vents and from the ooze-ups, all touching each other all the way around, but it doesn't actually begin that way, as you can see here. It's interesting stuff there. And as we showed you before, whatever oozing up is happening, it's not happening like it was happening before in a B2 camera here, where we can see that initial flood of lava, then it's sagging and settling here. I've tried to stabilize this because it looks like the camera actually moved when this flow first came and touched this block that the camera is on. I'm not sure if that's what it was or if it was some wind or something exactly what, but the camera wiggles, making it a little bit harder to tell exactly what's moving and what isn't. So I try to fix that a little bit. And it appears mostly you see the flood of lava raising the floor. And then as the flow continues going out, we just showed you lava is still oozing out to touch the ooze-ups from this finger right over here. Then this whole surface can continue to sag and drop down. So there's our B1 once again, with that little finger coming across. And here, the pads of lava that are oozing out there. And as we looked at this in more detail earlier around these September cones, right, I'm not quite clear exactly where that initial glow was coming for. It was next before, but it seems like this ooze up pattern may have been beginning even before the fountains began. So that's the B1. Move on to the K2. This is up from Uekahuna area. So when people report lava fountains higher than the rim, there you can see some of that right in there. And then it goes dark here the next night. Not a lot to see last night from there. And a final camera to show you guys the KP from the side of Mauna Loa. For that whole eruption, there it is, putting up that cloud of gas in the nighttime. And then now the glow actually shifts further to the west, right? So I'll point it out. When eruption begins, it begins here on the right side of this crater, and that initial gas cloud comes up. It blows off to the right, the trade winds. There's a trade wind direction there. And then the fountains actually stop. The glow shifts to this area on the left, which is likely the lava lake and overturning. And it starts building this cloud over here. And then eventually that starts drifting a little bit more in this direction. So we'll show that again there. There's a first burst, leans right, centralizes, now leans a little more to the left. But it's coming from that entire crater width there as opposed to just from the right side. So that's where the VOG went initially and might be blown back around. And beyond that, you can see that there are other trade wind clouds with moisture coming across the area as well. And one thing that we often do see is when these things come across this hot area, they do grow as well. And so you can have pyrocumulus formation as well on top of the VOG being produced from the volcano here too. So those are the time lapses from the USGS. They also have a photo release from episode 11, which is a few photographs to show you guys. So here is a sequence from the morning when the eruption shuts off. So 6:25, you see both vents, north vent on the bottom and the south vent up here, both going, 6:25, 6:26, 6:27 strong. Yeah, 6:28 maybe somewhere in there. You see the north vent shuts off right there. North vent is off, south vent still going. South vent slows down by 6:38, and here by 7:10, they're both all the way shut off. How quickly that can happen. So this photographs by Natalia Deline. North vent started erupting 6:35, and south vent at 7:06 a.m. there. So I'll show you guys another one here. A gas geoscientist. Towards the tail end of the eruption there, measuring the gas chemistry with this instrument here. I'll show you guys a caption by episode 11, photographed by Matt Patrick. Here's another one, a nice one of a scientist using a laser rangefinder to detect the height of the cone here. So we'll zoom into there and see what they're measuring. The description of this talks about the highest point of the rim, which is hard to tell through all this, but maybe it's in here or maybe it's in the back over here. But they're trying to measure the distance in elevation change from there to the crater floor down here. Right? So if we go back, they say there that the tallest cone rim was about 160 feet, 48 meters above the crater floor. And that's that view right there. 160 feet. So it gives you some frame of reference when you see the fountain shooting up and it looked twice as tall or 3 times as tall to the 160 feet that you actually can see. And there's a similar view to that sequence of closing down that we saw, of the final stages at dawn of the eruption there with this massive lava flood on the crater floor there. Photo by Matt Patrick between 6:30 and 7 a.m. there. And here we have a view of that western rim where all this new material, everything you see on the ground here in the foreground is all new fresh lava that dropped down here as a result of this eruption, including some bigger chunks like that compared to the size of the glove. There's another bigger chunk over there too. See, a lot of this stuff might have fragmented in midair instead of landing as solid, but this shows you that there's some big chunks coming all the way up here as well. So Matt Patrick, once again, large frothy clasts landed on the western caldera rim, in addition to many smaller clasts that have produced a thick carpet of new tephra. And some of these, look at that one there, really, really frothy. Look at the size of that hole. It's like a golf ball in the middle of this chunk of rock right there that's maybe broken in half since it landed there. So there they note, there Matt Patrick once again, the density of clasts produced by the recent fountaining is similar to that of a kitchen sponge due to abundant gas bubbles. These bubbles range in size from ones too small to see up to larger ones about the size of golf balls. So this is a good indication of how frothy this lava actually is and how it can really lose that elevation and kind of sag down just from sitting there, just from all this gas collecting and working its way out of the flow. Right? If you look at the, try to imagine, let's say like this is like if this was like a box of molten lava with a gas still in it right there, right? Like maybe it's like 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. How much of that is actually lava and how much is gas? And you might be looking at roughly half and half, or possibly more than half of its gas, just based on this particular sample right here. Very gassy stuff. And some very fluid stuff reaching the upper rim as well. There you can see that nice tail of a spatter bomb there. Look at how glossy and shiny it is. The shapes and textures of clasts produced by recent lava fountaining also indicate their fluid nature as they traveled through the air. Matt Patrick once again. So yeah, great images to help augment our experience here. And I think with that, Dan, we can turn to our Hawaii tracker observations, where we had more of the submissions of photographs and videos. We're going to crowdsource this a bit here and show you guys what else there is to see here. You're muted.
I was going to say, let's see how this goes. I'm just going to confirm that we can see stuff. We can. All right, great. Thank you for working, StreamYard. All right, so we have these clips that were submitted to us from our volunteers and photographers that submit to Hawaii Tracker. Some of them range from people with their cell phones that are visiting up to professional photographers. But if you can't tell the difference, I'm not going to point it out. We have a bunch of photos here lined up that just going to go through, and videos too. And we're going to see how this eruption looked on through the eyes of Hawaii Tracker. So we had the beginning of the eruption documented. When did it start again exactly? When was I saying the 6:20 something?
6:26 Tuesday night.
by 6:28, we have a post out on Hawaii Tracker with a photo of the eruption starting from Yvonne. Pretty cool there. And throughout the night, as more people showed up, we got more images and videos submitted to us. I'm not sure how to play in this mode. These Lou, hop in if you know how to play the videos in this presentation.
No, it's not going to let us.
Okay, stand by. Give me 1 second to get this set up a different way. We're going to move that, add this. Add that. Try that. Okay. Did we good on the face? Did this share over? Can anybody check? We're good? All right.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right. So we will go from there. So again, the photo from Yvonne. And we will now cue the video from Bo.
Here we go, guys. We called it.
The very beginning of the eruption there. And then as it progresses through the night. So we got these, you can see that fissure growing, that's fountains growing in this footage. Pretty cool. Keep it moving.
Here we go.
Oh, whoops. All right. So here we have a pic from Kodi Yamaguchi, and I really like this one. It was very hard to try and show anything about it. This was also the photo at the very beginning that you saw. But here he has a great framing of this whole shot, but also the Milky Way up in the top. So pretty impressive. So thank you, Kodi, for that. Long time contributor over on Hawaii Tracker. We also had Jason, who was up on Mauna Kea. And right at sunset, perfect timing to be able to catch that glow coming across, looking over Mauna Loa there, over towards Kīlauea. So pretty cool shot there from Jason. Good timing, saying that he hasn't been up there in almost 15 years. We also get to see the glow from Hilo. Ichi submitted another photo taken from the Hilo airport that night. And pretty cool shot. He submitted similar these type of shots during these eruptions, the past episodes. We also were able to see it from Saddle Road, so the glow was widely seen and pretty cool there. Oh my God. Here we have some from Scott Malice, a little time lapse while he was up there. I'll show that one more time because it's pretty cool. Thank you, Scott, for that. Moving on, we have another one from Scott. Whoops. I might have missed a video there. We will continue on then. Oh, there it is. It just didn't transition. From Misty, we can see that. I wanted to just show this one to show how high that fissure eventually got. And you can see it clearly over the edge of that caldera right there. And that second fountain. One thing I noticed is that first fountain, the primary fountain was in the beginning, and then it started to transition over to that the further fountain in the shot. So thank you there, Misty. Lehulu submitted this photograph as well. So really great, camera work here. And the long exposure and all that to be able to pull off this type of shot. Everybody has their unique style, and it is very difficult to capture the lava. So we appreciate all these that get submitted over on Hawaii Tracker. A little bit more of the fountaining action. Let's see who was that from Doug. Appreciate it there, Doug. And then some photography from Yvonne, the very start of the eruption there. Progresses to this, so those huge fountains and the river of lava running down off the sides of the cone. And finally, those extreme heights of 600 feet. Not the biggest, as we've heard, from Phil in previous eruptions, but for this eruption, pretty huge.
Yeah, it's the tallest for a long, long time, really, right? I remember when I was forced to drive around the park, I could look from the car out of the Kīlauea overlook and see the tops of the fountains like from there. You can see the tops of the fountains from everywhere, actually, right? But you couldn't see the whole bottom of the lake and everything else. But the tops were so high that you could see it from places you did not usually see it. Pretty fascinating to see that.
So moving on. This was the one I thought I was queuing up from Scott. Got another one of those vortexes inside the caldera there. They seem to be getting pretty common, these. Seems like every episode we have one of these videos submitted over on Tracker, so pretty cool stuff. Show that one more time there. Pretty cool to see it.
Yeah, Scott, Scott, yeah, I've been running into Scott up there as well. Not last time, but yeah, he's been at 7 of the 11. I bet lots of you guys have your own counts of how many of these episodes you've made it to see as well, whether in person or online. Everyone's got their own little journey through this.
I like this one just because of the zoom that comes in here, and you can really see that as the fall time of that frothy lava. Then it come down and then form that lava river almost coming up the slopes. So pretty cool. And that was from, I want to make sure get it, Chelsea. I appreciate it there. Good stuff. And all this is over on Hawaii Tracker. Go to the next. Video from Sherry. This looks kind of early on because that other fissure hasn't really activated yet.
Yeah, and it was really loud. It's probably worth mentioning that. It was maybe at the same time as those very high fountains, they got really, really loud. People were talking about it being audible from all over the place around here. At my house, I'm probably 6 miles away. I never hear anything from Halemaʻumaʻu. It was distinct through the koki frogs. In fact, that's how loud it was.
Really loud then. So I think I have one last one. Whoops. And just to show the VOG a little bit, volcanoes bloom from 25 miles away in Hilo. So just what it looked like in the morning as the eruption was coming to an end. So this gets us through our submissions over on Hawaii Tracker. If you're not a part of Hawaii Tracker, check it out on Facebook. It's the biggest group on Facebook that focuses on Hawaii Island. We have a bunch of amazing photographers on there, and this is just a snapshot of all of the stuff that went up on Tracker over the past 24 hours at this point, or 48 hours. Yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff. You really had to pick through some stuff and leave some good stuff out there, right there. So yeah, it's definitely worth going and looking. Every episode, there's tons of information there. That's really how we're crowdsourcing the views of this eruption. Everyone can contribute, right? That's part of our whole approach here. So yeah, please check it out. Share something if you have it to share, and join a community. Right. Be active in the community.
Yeah, and now we are very close to 150,000 members there, like 149.8 or something like that now. So you could be the 150th member of Hawaii Tracker by joining.
Yeah, if you're not yet.
I just dropped the link in the chat for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Lou.
Mm-hmm. This last picture here, there's a wall of fog. I think there might be some pyrocumulus in there as well, right? So it's from the still air and that overnight cold. It was cold last night too, so that cold air, and then have all this hot air right over that giant lava lake. So it makes sense to have some extra cloud buildup there.
Yeah.
All right. So I thought
pretty cool.
add one more, which is my own, since I was able to go down to Kīlauea as well, overlook, and get a view of this here. So I'll just start playing this here, since there's various.
Hold on, Phil. Reset that, Phil. There we go. You're good.
And it just takes it a minute to activate there, but yeah, so lots of different areas that you could focus on a little bit at a time, or even a full picture. So there is a wide view. This is probably between 10 and 11 o'clock at night, so this is past that highest parts of the fountains. You can maybe see over here there's a little bit of an old flow that's just cooling off there. That was a result of the high fountains spreading down. It's over here to the right now. Over there, right? But you can see the south vent on the left, north vent on the right. We are still getting a little bit of splashing on this upper ledge up here, and feeding not only these outlet flows from the mouths of these channels, but this extra flow over the top over here with all this massive, not sure what you want to call it, like a lava falls or rapids, or depending where, right? A lava shower at one moment in time. And that's feeding all the stuff in the foreground. You can see movement in the flow here as well, across through there. All this stuff is moving here, the channel winding through there, and all these little spots are overflows of that perched pond, upper perch pond. And of course, we're way zoomed in. You can't see that full extent of the pad like you did in the previous shot there. But lots to focus on there, right? As we just heard from USGS, maybe right in here, might be 160 feet tall, height of this fountain there. So see this burst of lava shooting way up there. Here, Dane, it can be more for you again. You like the view of the top of the fountain there?
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things we've been seeing is trying to use just the timing of how long it takes some of that stuff to fall to get a ballpark idea of how tall the fountains are, right? Without having something to help you triangulate or anything like that, the height of the thing. So always cool to see these giant fountains and the close-ups of them. Like I was just thinking that the heights in 2018 were nothing even compared to this of any of the fissures, as far as I can remember. Like I don't think anything got that tall or close to.
I think like a fissure and a fountain technically are different, or it's a different style of eruption, right? Even if we call it still erupting from fissure A, we're having a lava fountain for the later stages there, right? And fissures usually don't. They kind of start off, they're distributed, pressures spread out across a larger area. So it's really interesting when you have this buildup of processes, now 11 episodes that are really shaping the nozzles of these vents, north vent and south vent, they're both. And with these drain backs and clogging and things collapsing, and one's glowing, it's not glowing. So when it starts up again, it maybe it's going to shoot out through a pretty small little nozzle, and that can maybe let it spray up further and further. And it's not quite clear if that's what's changing the heights of the fountains, perhaps. Or if it's actually, is there more pressure building up? The tilt meter doesn't look like it's showing extra tilt, like there's more pressure building up than before. And it might be just the shape of the nozzle, right? Like putting your thumb over the end of a garden hose and letting it spray further out in a thinner stream. A way to get at this would be some information from the USGS. If we actually had the actual volumes, or the derivative of that, the actual flux rate, the rate of lava coming out of the vent during each episode, to compare whether there's more coming out now than before, right? That'd be interesting to tell. There's a south vent. I just want to point out there's an extra little spatter source right down here. Doesn't become nearly as big as the other ones, but you can see there's other stuff coming through the bottom of this vent, and the lava down there as well. And here is a 20 times time lapse, and there's a little gap in between there. You can see how it advances over the course of that hour. Right there, everything moving and spreading out across the crater floor from that more frontal view. And there, that full fountaining and movement of lava across all those levees and channels all through there. And yeah, from Kīlauea overlook, bright skies, lots of people walking out at all hours. People from all over the world, people from Kona that start driving over at 6:30, and we're getting there just in time. So lots of cool stuff to share, and hopefully people got to enjoy it one way or another. And if not before now, then at least through these different things. All right, so those are the observations that we have to share. There's just one last thing before we get into the questions here, and that is the volcano watch for this week. And this week, the nose knows, and so did HVO gas instrumentation eventually. And this is a story of the September 2024 eruption at Nepal crater, because it was a dark and stormy night. That very first night of eruption, it was really rainy. The winds were Kona winds, so the actual gases were not blowing towards the automatic gas detectors to have us detect whether there was an eruption ongoing with that amount of gas or not. However, residents of volcano went to social media to report sulfurous odors and burning smells. So some members reported only smelling the burning without the sulfur. Gas badges didn't go off. There is always H2S, hydrogen sulfide, that's remnant, especially around pool and Leilani areas where you have groundwater interacting with these hot rocks still there, so that can smell as well. So even with reports of sulfur smells, they couldn't be completely sure. But when the weather cleared and they flew out there and put up the new webcam, they could then see if there was indeed that small fissure eruption west of Pool. Right there, right? We also saw a little bit of glow on some of the other cameras, like the mono camera, but it was not as good as what came that next day there. So they measured gases all throughout there. They noted because there was several different episodes of that eruption as well, right? It depends on whether you're going during the fountaining phases or the pauses. So you might get 300 tons a day when there is a pause, and you might have 12,000 tons per day when you have another episode going as well. Fountain weakens, drops to 3,500, down to 2,000 next morning, and on, 5,000 to 12,000 to 30,000, down to 800. You can see how they were able to track the gases through the time, especially with those monitors. But ultimately, even with this great monitoring staff and equipment and setup that we have here on Kīlauea, which is arguably the best monitored volcano in the world, you can still have these gaps in data, right? Where it's raining and it's dark and the wind's blowing the wrong way. And it takes people in the community to, once again, crowdsource this information and help inform what actually is going on at a site. So pretty cool. The full article is shown here. It's posted online on our usual locations. And with that, we can maybe pause to take our questions and have some discussion.
All right. We got a decent amount today, so try and get through them. So we can just get into it, huh? Just loop some of the footage. And all right. So let's see here. Let's start out with this one. So Juliana asked, the last two episodes were the shortest so far, but the most powerful. What, if anything, do these short events suggest?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think these last two and episode 6 all tie for the shortest at about 13 hours. Yeah. And the most powerful is really hard to quantify. That's where I was getting at a little earlier, right? I would really like to know how much is coming out, what's the actual eruption rate, or what's the total eruption volume of each episode, so we can tell, is it just shooting up higher, but there's the same amount coming out? Is there actually more coming out and it's shooting higher as well? That's not quite clear from what we're seeing, right? We're maybe seeing 75 or 80% of the crater floor covered as opposed to 50. Maybe that's another way to get at it. It does seem like maybe that's the case. I don't have a great answer to that question, unfortunately. Just can discuss, what I would like to know more, and maybe that's something to ask the USGS. In particular, what are the flux rates there, right? What do we know about the rate of lava coming out of the ground there?
All right. Okay, thank you. And next question is from Buster Brown, who asks, I've noticed the particular diurnal pattern in the inflation rates, with it being faster between 9 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time and 6 p.m. Any ideas on this? So I think you've highlighted this before, yeah. This
Yeah.
particular pattern. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. I can't tell you why it's there. That's something that they try to prevent being there if they can, by having the installation be perfect. But there's lots of different things that could affect it, right? It could be like something in the signal, like maybe there's something affecting the wiring, or maybe there's something with the installation or the case or the temperature in the daytime or the temperature of the actual rocks that the thing is actually in. I don't know. I mean, it could be lots of things there, but clearly it's a diurnal pattern happening there, right? That we didn't see before. So I'm not sure if that's just a calibration thing, possibly too, or I mean, I really can't really add any insight besides I see it too, Buster. I think we're all seeing it there. There's one more thing we got to filter. Which honestly, when we look at it's about every other signal, all the ones in the Lower East Rift, all the ones on the South Flank, they usually all show this pattern. And we're a little bit spoiled at Kahuna that it was so clean for so long. And I'm curious, like, what changed that we can now see it so prominently.
Right.
But yeah, it is there for sure.
This is a somewhat common question I've been seeing since Yvonne and that hole in the path. From Brett, what do you make of the steam vent over Wahine Kapu overlook? Is this a sign that maybe activity is going to migrate to a new location?
Usually no. I mean, the steam vents are not directly related to this eruption. They're more like a passive part of the system on the edges of the main magmatic system, right? So you have your magma chamber in the center and all your whatever's going on in the center. And then outside of that crater, you have all the rainfall, it's groundwater trying to come in towards that. And where it starts coming close, it hits those faults and it comes out those cracks of steam. So I'm just telling you that there's a lot of heat down there. That area has been steaming throughout all the pauses that are years long of eruptions, and don't really steam any more when there's an eruption or any less when there's not. It's just kind of pretty constant all the time sort of thing. But they can change when the ground settles and like when cracks move. So it's probably more likely that, right? You're just seeing the volcano is changing shape a lot. And it's not quite clear if that's because of this eruption or inflation. It could be, although, the inflation we've seen over the last 2 months now is not nearly the range of what we saw over the previous 5 years, as we showed in the graph earlier. So to me, it's less likely to be that. Yeah, it's a good thing to consider. It's like we lost the question again. I can't remember the questions for that long.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think you got it there. So thank you, Phil, and thank you for everybody that submitted questions. We have one from Nicholas here. At the rate Kīlauea is erupting lava, how many? This kind of relates to another question we got here. But how many eruptions would it need to make it to the next downdrop block? Roughly speaking.
Well, another good question that we don't have any answer to because we don't know how much lava is coming out.
Right.
So, yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to know that as well. But our last map we have is from February 7th, so that was like in episode 8. So we're not getting every episode to even be able to extract it that way. We have to just really wait for more information to come out there, and it's hard to answer that.
Right.
Yeah, but really, like there aren't any more downdrop blocks left, really, right? It's like it's covering the one. It's just kind of sloped from the 2018 collapse, and if it fills that whole area up, which it will take a long time, I would estimate years, then you might get onto the actual caldera floor, right? And then you have more years. You could go many more years to go if you kept going in there.
All right, and let's do one more from Potus. Asks, I have a question. What makes this eruption so different than the others in that the conduit stays permanently open rather than collapsing?
Yeah, another great question that I don't know the answer to, Dane. Anyone really understands that. It's found that perfect balance and nothing is changing very fast, I think is how I would put it, right? We know things in Kīlauea change all the time. There's always stuff moving, the ground's moving, the magma's coming in and pressurizing as well. But it just so happens that right now nothing is moving quite fast enough, right? Maybe it's the fact that the south flank has slowed a little bit, and it's not making as much space for the pressure to move out of the summit and can stay in the summit. That's maybe one component of it, right? Maybe it's the fact that you have such a nicely vertical vent or something like that, and maybe you have this buffer zone of the lava lake as well. But that's really just speculating, honestly.
Since we're talking about speculating, one thing that keeps me on this particular eruption is that it feels like, and this is just my naive opinion on the thing, but it's almost as if it's in the lava lake phase of Halemaʻumaʻu, but there isn't the elevation to contain it. So it's like, it's going up and down in the old conduit, except that old conduit is, it doesn't exist as it did then. So we get this action, but I don't know. That's what I'm almost thinking. I know that's probably, pretty rough, but
that's probably one part of it, right? And then combined with their explanation of you have this difference in kinds of magma. You basically have some very frothy magma that's building up pressure underground, and you have some degassed magma that's closer to the top. So it's kind of like a plug or like a seal, but it's not like a perfectly hard seal. It's liquid, flat lava that's degassed that can actually be pushed out of the way, right? So you can build up enough pressure below to actually then have to displace the stuff. And then once that frothy stuff reaches the top, that's when your fountains actually begin, and not just this oozing up or even an ooze of flows. And, hard to tell with any of these camera angles, but those flows on this far northeast part over here, I'm kind of curious, like, are those also super frothy lavas similar to the lava coming out of this fountain, or are those old degassed lavas that are getting pushed out and flushed out from below as well, right? If I was USGS and was trying to devise a sampling plan, I'd see, is there any way to get a piece of this somehow safely to compare it to the other stuff that we have landing here in the crater rim, and see how that stuff been sitting in the lake, and it's, like the lava shooting up through here over top and also injecting underground and pushing something up. Is it flushing stuff out, or is it like that old degassed lava is maybe draining and it can go over here because this is where it's out of the way for this path upwards? There's all kinds of possibilities of what might be happening in there, and it takes more information, right, from getting samples, chemistry, or different angles, points of view, those kind of things, to really try to pick apart what's going on. I think what's clear is that there's these bigger patterns that we really can lock into, right? Kind of give us an expectation of how the volcano actually works, with the gas pressure being an important part of it, the degassed lava being an important part of it, this changing pressure within it, this rising and falling being a part of it as well. And then also the whole network connecting underground, right? That's somehow keeping enough of the same shape that the pressure threshold isn't changing very much. The USGS is able to bracket and say it's going to be 5 to 10 days because it decreased 10 microradians. And at the current rate, we've gained 2 microradians. And at this rate, it takes 5 days to gain 10 microradians. And so the threshold is not changing very much, which means there's not a lot changing with the system as a whole overall also. It's changing a little bit from, one eruption to the next, but not completely resetting it, right? So all those things got to contribute somehow and allow us to have this kind of magical era, right? And so I kind of hope we see this for a long time, but at some point it is going to end. It's not going to be doing this forever, obviously. And why it ends is going to be the interesting part, right? Like, is it because of some change in the magma itself coming out? Is it not as frothy, it's more gummy? Is it because there's an earthquake and then we have more space underground and magma can pressurize a larger area that includes maybe the southeast rift connector, the Middle East rift zone, or the southwest rift zone?
My money would be on the south flank, doing something, and that changes it. But that's just, where I would bet on, type of thing. Don't know.
Yeah, hard to tell, right? Yeah, there's always this wait and watch and see, and that's just follow along and try to learn and be as educated as possible. And the reason we do this is so that if an eruption happens in habitated areas once again, it won't be what the heck is this and what's going on, but rather like it'll be an oh no for sure. But also we know what this is. We know that we have to worry about the gases. We know about the patterns of eruption rates, how it can pressurize and have a higher rate at the beginning, and then back off and re-equilibrate, how you can have multiple episodes, multiple pulses, injections through accumulated lava on the ground. All this kind of stuff is relevant when it comes to is something like this happening in a neighborhood, right? And that's why we run a nonprofit and do volcano education, is partly because it's fun and all that stuff is cool to talk about, but ultimately because we want to make ourselves safer inhabitants of this dynamic landscape here.
Yep.
Anything else you want to throw in here, Dane?
I think that's about it. We are at the hour-and-a-half mark, so that'd be a good point to go ahead and wrap it up. Sorry, I got a dog barking angrily in the background, so I'm
yeah, it's about that time then. So, all right, we'll see if we have another episode before next week's update, and if not, then we'll maybe look at some retrospective stuff. But otherwise, we'll be with you guys recapping what's happened in the next week, a week from today on Thursday, 5 p.m. Hawaiian time, as usual. Anything else, Dane?
I think that's it. Thanks everybody for joining.
Right. Thank you guys. Are you guys for watching live to the end of our hour-and-a-half here, or rewatching after the fact? And appreciate all your support. So from our nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, we have backstage Lou, and right above me we have Dane, and I'm Philip. Aloha, everybody. Until next week.